Today on Inside Utah Politics, we're talking to Representative John Curtis about his GOP win for retiring Senator Mitt Romney's seat. Hear what he's focusing on ahead of the general election coming up in November. Governor Spencer Cox is holding tight to his title. He is one step closer to re-election now, while he says his message to disagree better is one that Utah understands best. Utah's candidates preparing for November will bring you a recap from the primary election and what voters need to know before heading to the polls again.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Brien McElhatten. Let's go inside Utah politics now. Our first guest today is Congressman John Curtis, joining us over Zoom from Washington, D.C., just days after securing his win in the Utah primary there, the GOP race for the open Senate seat. First of all, Congressman, congratulations on your win.
Thank you, Brian. I'll tell you, it was very gratifying, and a big thanks to all the voters out there.
This was a very crowded field, quite a contest in terms of rhetoric, in terms of money coming into the state. What do you think put you over the top?
Well, that's a great question. Of course, we're all asking that today. I believe it was a message that we had, a message that getting things done matters, a message that working with people matters, and how we work with them matters. And I just was really pleased with the reception of the message.
So how does your campaign shift now into general election mode? What does that look like?
Well, I'll tell you, I wish we could just say we're going to take a couple of months off, but the reality of it is day number 2, you just start working on the next phase. And we won't take it lightly. We'll run like we're from behind, and we'll make our case to the people in Utah about why we hope to be the next senator.
I want to ask you about money. A lot of money came into the state from other places. PACs and super PACs, according to federal records, contributed about $7.5 million. And that was mostly just in the last few weeks of this race. Now, those PACs and super PACs, that can motivate some voters, corporations, other people to donate to a cause. But it also, I think, disappoints some voters who are concerned about outside money coming into a race and affecting the outcome. How do you feel about PACs and super PACs? Are they a good idea, or are they not so good for the political system here?
Yeah, this is actually my first race of many races where I haven't been on the other side of this equation. And if it were up to me, I'd be happy to say, look, all the out-of-state money has to stay out. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court has determined otherwise, and so it is part of our reality. And I would also point out, while it feels like they have an oversized influence, if you go back and actually look at the polling data throughout this race, you'll see that that money didn't really change anything dramatically in the polling or in the results.
I want to ask you, as a founding member of the Conservative Climate Caucus, you have a new bill. It's on the president's desk concerning nuclear energy and trying to cut some red tape there. You've been a champion of nuclear energy. Tell me about this bill and where we stand with it right now.
So the bill is part of a package of nuclear bills that came out of the Energy and Commerce Committee that I serve on. The package is proudly bipartisan. It had really strong support on both sides of the aisle, which I think is really important, but also a little bit telling that both parties now are promoting nuclear. And my specific bill, as you mentioned, it cuts some red tape and makes it easier to deal with the fees that actually come with the government to try to permit nuclear. And the reality of it is, if we look at our future, our energy future, if we can't get nuclear rolling again, that's going to be very problematic for our economy, for emissions, just on a lot of levels. This is an important part of our energy future.
You know, one of the issues that comes with nuclear, sure, there's no emissions from it, but some are concerned about the radioactive materials used in the production of nuclear power. I know the Navajo Nation, its president, Nygren, and others have asked the federal government to halt the transport of radioactive material from mines through their territory, through their reservation. How do you feel about that? Where do you stand on that?
You know, it's interesting. Nuclear has what I would say a branding problem, and there are concerns which are legitimate. I don't mean to say they're not legitimate, but it's our safest form of energy. If you look at all things considered, we're actually safer with nuclear than any other form of energy. That doesn't mean we shouldn't stop dealing with solutions for this waste, and there's some really great innovations out there. One of them is simply recycling. We only use just a small percentage of the potential fuel in those rods, and we can recycle those, and that's a great thing. We've also got to come to terms with better storage. We've not been willing to answer the storage questions, so most of this is stored on site at these nuclear facilities, and we can do better than that. And I would just challenge our innovators to come up with solutions to these things. I don't think we need to settle for not having answers to them, but we need to define the goal and the objective and go to work on it.
Do you see nuclear as the key component in Utah's energy portfolio, in America's energy portfolio, or do you see more of a patchwork of fuels and solutions here?
Yeah, I think anybody that understands our energy future knows that, let's just say in the year 2050, just to pick a year, we're going to need all the nuclear we can get. We're going to need all of the clean fossil fuels that we can get. We're going to need all of the renewables that we can get and the new innovation that's coming. The demands for energy are so dramatic. And let me just give you one example. The AI facility hoping to locate in Utah is asking for 1.5 gigawatts of energy consistently 24/7. Now, to put that in perspective, the entire state of Wyoming took 100 years to get 1 gigawatt, and we're trying to get more than that just to run one facility. Now, put these facilities really around the country, and you can see the demand is so dramatic that we're really going to need all of these energy sources. And I'm confident if you go down the road a little bit, you're going to see three components to energy. It's going to be affordable, it's going to be reliable, and it's going to be clean. And we'll be using all of these sources to do that.
I want to ask you about immigration now. Such an important topic. A lot of Americans are concerned about this and potential security threats along the border. You've been a critic of President Biden's immigration policies. I do want to ask you about a newer policy of his. He's blocking migrants from claiming asylum at the border until fewer people are crossing illegally. Do you feel that's an effective solution right now?
To me, it's actually a strategy to help his campaign more than it is to help at the border. The numbers are still way too high. Even if he's wildly successful with his program, the numbers are way too high. And my biggest question is, why now? Why didn't we do this months ago, years ago, when everybody could see this as a problem? I don't think we're really addressing the problem there. If I could had a magic wand and do anything I wanted, I'd reinstate Remain in Mexico, which would dramatically change what's happening down there. It's humane and doesn't cost the United States even a penny.
NBC News was first to report this just days ago, but Department of Homeland Security officials reported 400 migrants smuggled into the United States with the help of an ISIS-K affiliated smuggling group. Now, those same government sources told NBC they don't necessarily think these people are terrorists or pose an imminent threat, but the connection to an ISIS-K group is nonetheless alarming. Do you think the federal government is paying close enough attention to potential terrorist threats coming across the border?
Listen, I've been down there, and the reality of it is the cartels are in charge of our border, not the U.S. government. And if you think, or anybody thinks that they care who's coming and who's not coming into our country, then we're fooling ourselves. We have to regain control of our borders. There's no reason that we want to delegate that to anybody, much less the cartels in Mexico. They're the ones deciding who's coming into our country, when they're coming, and literally how much it costs to come into our country.
I want to ask you about legislation that you might propose if you end up winning your Senate race to address that very issue. Do you have anything in mind, anything you're ready to pull the trigger on?
So in the House, over a year ago, we did H.R. 2. That's our wish list, right? Everything in H.R. 2, if people want to look that up, we'll tell you exactly what we would do as House Republicans. But the reality of it is we could pull some of those provisions out of H.R. 2 and even not even get everything we wanted and make a dramatic change. And I'll come back to this Remain in Mexico as one of the policies in H.R. 2. But I also want to be clear. The laws are there to take care of the border. They're just simply not being enforced. So Congress's role is passing laws. And we have the laws there. They're just simply not being enforced. Now, I will give you, there's another component to this, which is immigration reform, not dealing necessarily with these illegal border crossings. And Congress has let the ball down in that arena, and we have to do better on immigration reform.
The FBI and Homeland Security officials have warned against a growing insider threat, terrorist threat, violence ahead of the November election. Do you feel that the interagency is on the same page, that the different agencies are sharing enough information about this potential threat to head off, heaven forbid, any violence?
Yeah, I think the problem with that question is there is no point where you can say it's enough. So they may be doing a lot, but I'm just going to tell you, we have to be ever watchful on this and can't take our eye off the ball at all. And we've got to give the American people confidence and trust in these elections so that they can feel comfortable that bad things won't happen.
One more question for you in our short time remaining. We had Jonathan Golden on our show last week. He's a wildland firefighter, former wildland firefighter from Summit County. He talked about the Wildland Firefighter Paycheck Protection Act, hoping to boost pay for federal wildland firefighters. Many of them make $15 an hour, and yet they have to protect life, property, and our beautiful public lands. That bill has languished in Congress. It hasn't yet to get a full vote in the Senate. I don't think it's yet gone through committee in the House. Have you read that bill? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I can tell you I'm very familiar with the issue, not that specific bill. And it's like, how do we expect these people to leave homes, do something that's dangerous for $15 an hour? It's just not reasonable. We're also not spending enough money on mitigation to make sure that they don't have to go fight these fires. Overall, we're not looking closely at this issue. I co-chair a caucus here in the House for wildfires with Congressman Neguse out of Colorado. Pay is one of the things on our wish list that we would like to change, but we also have to stop the problems that are causing the fires, and we're really not spending enough time and effort on that.
Okay, Congressman John Curtis, we appreciate your time. We'll talk again in the future, I hope. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you.
Still ahead here on Inside Utah Politics, the race to lead Utah. Why Governor Spencer Cox says his strategy to win a second term is not unique to Utah. And the U.S. Surgeon General declaring gun violence a national public health crisis. Find out how this could change gun legislation in America. Utah Governor Spencer Cox has his eye on a second term now after defeating State Representative Phil Lyman in the Republican primary election. This was a hotly contested race in rhetoric. The governor felt his integrity was questioned in this race. He's referred to Lyman as a conspiracy theorist. Now, in the governor's victory speech, he talked about the divisive climate of politics in 2024. He says this result shows the Utahns want government to operate a different way. While his conservatism was called into question, Governor Cox argued that he and the lieutenant governor were the conservatives in this race. He came out strong on that point. Governor Cox drew a line on what he believes it means to be a conservative and what isn't. He was adamant that it didn't mean angry rhetoric or dismantling institutions, which he accused Representative Lyman of. We asked Mr. Cox if his attempt to disagree better, which is a campaign he's a part of, is a movement he's in the forefront of. He says no, that's just always been Utah.
I want to be clear, this is who we are, but it is not in our DNA. We are going to have to fight because the rest of the country decided that we're not going to do this anymore, that we're going to hate each other, that we're going to tear each other apart. And in Utah, we're the anchor. We're the last best hope of this nation to say that's not who we are. We are better than that. So I'm not at the forefront. I'm not at the forefront. I am following generations of leaders from Utah who have always done it this way.
Well, the governor will now move on to November and try to win re-election against Democrat Brien King. He believes the party will come together in the effort because he says he doesn't just love who voted for him, but all of Utah. Turning our focus now to the U.S. Surgeon General this week, calling gun violence a public health crisis. His move has renewed efforts in Congress to pass legislation that Democrats say will keep more people safe. Our Washington correspondent Maddie Biertemple reports on those efforts and pushback from others who say guns aren't the problem here.
Democrats on Capitol Hill are praising the U.S. Surgeon General's advisory, calling gun violence a public health crisis.
Huge win, a major landmark announcement.
California Congresswoman Barbara Lee says warnings from the country's top doctor can shift public opinion.
They've fundamentally changed the nation's perspective on issues like smoking, HIV, and AIDS.
House Democrats are trying to turn that into action by forcing a vote on a red flag bill by sidestepping the typical process.
New strategy to move this legislation along.
Congresswoman Lucy McBath's bill aims to remove guns from those deemed a danger to themselves or others But gun advocates say the Surgeon General's report isn't a real step forward, and Democrats' bills won't stop gun violence.
It's really more of a PR stunt than it is any serious attempt at public policy.
Amy Swearer with the Conservative Heritage Foundation says measures like red flag laws raise Second Amendment concerns, and lawmakers should focus on enforcing existing laws with tougher penalties.
When you start demonizing that firearm, you are removing yourself from any opportunity to really start solving the underlying issues.
For Democrats to bring the bill to the floor, a majority of the House would need to sign a petition to bypass Speaker Johnson, an unlikely move in the GOP-controlled House. In Washington, I'm Maddie Beertemple.
Still to come from us here on the heels of Utah's Republican primary election, a local political expert is weighing in on the races that have set the stage for November. We'll be right back.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Welcome back to Inside Utah Politics. We're taking a close look now at the election results and the poll numbers from Utah's primary election. Joining us today is Professor Zoe Nemerever, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Utah Valley University. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So what's the headline from the primary race? What stuck out to you here?
What stands out to me is that the winners of the convention were not the winners of the primary election. So that signature gathering route was very important because it was an opportunity for candidates who felt like they could represent Utah's voters but didn't get on the ballot at the convention, that they could go out in their community, gather signatures, and then go on to win the primary. And so we see those democratic institutions functioning exactly as they should, where if the convention is out of touch with what voters want, there's that opportunity for signature gathering so that the primary election can be who the primary electorate wants to represent them in the general.
Utah is so unique. Can you tell me and elaborate a little bit on the makeup of the delegates at the convention versus, say, the general electorate?
The delegates who attend the convention are much more involved in partisan politics, so not only are they more passionate, but they also tend to have views that are more extreme, not only compared to the average Utahn, but also the average Republican voter, and even as we're seeing now, the average Republican primary voter. And that's really saying something because we already know from political science research that primary voters are more extreme than general election voters. So for there to even be such a notable split within this pre-general election season, that's really showing that the party's divided between who the delegates are and who the rest of the primary electorate is.
You know, looking at the poll numbers, the polls seem pretty accurate this time around. Say what you will about polling. We know there are missteps along the way, but in this case, the polls seem pretty accurate. What makes a good poll versus a bad one?
A good poll is actually not any single poll. You want to interpret polling results in aggregate. So looking at lots of different polls taken by different polling firms, because they might use slightly different techniques on different days, because we don't know what current event had just happened 2 hours before the poll was released to the respondents. So you really want to look at overtime trends, looking at many polls together so that if there's an outlier, you're not putting too much weight into it. Then also remembering that the average margin of error for a poll is about 3% plus or minus. And so if you have one candidate at 51% and another at 49%, that's not statistically different the way we look at it in survey research. And so those close races, be very wary about putting too much stock into any statistic that would have noise that naturally occurs.
Yeah, that's the thing, the signal to noise ratio. We talk about it in broadcasting. We talk about it in political science too, don't we? That's a big factor in these things. A lot of thought goes into doing these polls. So I wonder then, are there any inferences or predictions we can make from this election as we apply them toward the general election coming up in just a few months?
So the one caveat to making too many inferences would be that general election voters are slightly different than primary election voters. But overall, we see that there's a preference for more moderate Romney-style Republicans versus the Trump loyalists, most of whom were chosen at the convention process. All but one of them, I think, failed to win their actual primary. And so we're seeing, even though I think Romney has been like malaligned for recent events, that actually seems to be the brand of Republicanism that many Utah voters are preferring. And so it'll be interesting to see that moving forward, if that continues to be a direction the party moves, or if, like other Republican states, we see a swing towards Trump loyalism.
So let's take Trent Staggs, for example. He had the endorsement of Donald Trump and some other notable people in that corner of the Republican Party. I wonder, do those MAGA candidates now look at the results here and say, if I'm going to run again, I need to retool my messaging? What do they do after they lose a primary?
So they might retool their messaging. It is kind of a double-edged sword, because as a candidate, if you retool your messaging too much, then you'll be attacked for not standing for anything. And so, you know, we think in human behavior, if something doesn't work or we want a different result, we change our behavior and then to get a different outcome. But in politics, if you get too much of a different outcome, then maybe you're labeled as a flip-flopper or a betrayer.
John Kerry got called a flip-flopper many years ago, 2004.
Right, and so it's hard for politicians to evolve or progress in their personal positions, because we're tracking them over time, and voters do like consistency because we're voting based on a candidate's future actions. If the candidate is consistent leading up to that election, it makes it easier for us to predict what they'll do in the future. If a candidate has been all over the place voting for some conservative bills, for some liberal bills, then when we go to vote for them, we're not sure what we're voting for their next term. And I think also will largely depend on if Trump remains in politics after this election. If he wins, I think we'll see much more incentive for candidates who were loyal to Trump to stay with that brand of Republicanism. If he loses and decides to leave politics, then I think we'll see the Republican Party, you know, have a soul-searching moment to figure out like what their future in the short term looks like in terms of branding and messaging.
So you teach university classes. You've got students from all backgrounds and all walks of life. And I wonder, what do you tell them to watch for, particularly as we head into the home stretch of a big election year?
I tell my students to pace themselves, right? It's not even the 4th of July yet, and we're already in like the depths of election season, it feels, for people like you and I who watch a lot of it. It's okay, I tell my students, to maybe spend 10 minutes reading the headlines a day. You don't have to listen to hours and hours of news, or, you know, drink from the fire hose of things that seemingly develop every 5 minutes, right? Like push notifications are generally not healthy.
The news cycle is constant.
It is, and it can be very exhausting. And I don't want, especially younger voters who this might be their first election or don't have a lot of context for voting because they're new to following politics, to do what's manageable for them. I also, even though it's not the advice we received in college, I recommend Wikipedia, especially for younger voters, because it has all the hyperlinks to the primary sources at the bottom, so students can evaluate whether that's a credible source or not themselves. And especially for voters who want more context, those Wikipedia articles do a great job. If, for example, today we saw a lot of comments in the presidential debate about Medicare and Medicaid. If you want to know what the difference between those are, or how long they've been the healthcare policy in our country, like Wikipedia, with one click will take you right to that, and you can see the history of healthcare policy in the United States, and that can be very useful, especially for voters who are maybe feeling like they don't know enough to vote, which is absolutely wrong. Everybody should feel comfortable voting. I promise you are qualified. No imposter syndrome.
And the information is so readily available now.
It is, exactly.
Yeah. Professor, thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you for having me.
I hope we'll have you on again soon.
Thank you.
Okay, stay with us, everybody. More Inside Utah Politics is coming up right after this. All right, that does it for this edition of Inside Utah Politics. Don't forget, if you have any local political stories you'd like to see, make sure to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. You can email InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow along with me on social media, on X @Brien Reports, and on Instagram too. Just search for Brien McElhatten. And find ABC4 on social media to follow along no matter where you are. And while you're at it, download the ABC4 News app. Headlines in your pocket wherever you happen to be. Thanks so much for being with us, everyone. We'll see you right back here next week.